a global alliance. Europe was responsible for this particular definition, but there are all sorts of, it's a really thick document. If it's just a definitions document, I think it's about, it's really printed small, it's about 60 pages. So any definition within the industry, as we see it, is in that document. And the important thing I think to note here is that if you've got fiber that terminates in your house, but it's pushed back on some other technology, whatever that may be, we do not see that as FTTH. The FTTH Council does not recognize that as a true FTTH network. So FTTH network, in our books, is an end-to-end fiber optic network. And I agree, there are room for all sorts of technologies, it's just not our definition of what FTTH is. And I think that's it. One of the other things I wanted to mention is that communities are welcome to attend our annual conference. This year it's in October, and you can attend free of charge. Make our members pay to fund your participation. But it's a 2-day event, and you're welcome to give us your name. You are welcome to sit there and learn. There are exhibitions on the latest technologies that's available. There's a lot of people that come in and talk about what's happening. We look at, from the submarine cables, what's happening in that space. We break it up to national long distance. We look at the metro space, what's happening on the access build side. Until now, it's been very much business focused, looking at FTTP, with proliferation. I must confess that, everybody, put their handbrakes up. We just did our annual report, still very big, fiber to the business focused, and we need to not go back and suddenly, put a big change on this thing and start looking at the communities that are interested. What I did is I invited Ryan this morning to come and talk a little bit about their journey, where it came from, and how Parkers, the drivers that they experienced. It's important to know that there is a slight distinction between FTTH in gated communities and FTTH for non-gated communities, as we call it. Within gated communities, security is a driver, security is a driver everywhere, but it's not as big a driver as we find within non-gated communities, and it's one of the more important areas. The problem that we've had with gated communities is I think that we find that uptake has not been what we would have liked to do. And doing the math in my own head now, I realize it's because the driver there is not security. The driver there is content or over-the-top services. Communities, gated communities, are looking outside of security. They've got the booms, they've got the fingerprint technology, they've got the guards that are walking and patrolling. So what do we need to take them to make it attractive? And then for non-gated communities, what is it and how do we serve their needs, and how do we use the current drivers to ensure that there's efficient uptake? So I'm going to ask Ryan now to tell us a little bit more about Parkers and just their journey and where they came from, and I'm sure you're going to see some similarities in your own initiatives. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks. I'm going to be quite short. I prefer people to just kind of ask questions, actually, more than anything else. I don't know. I don't know if all suburbs are similar to ours, but basically the main driver for us was twofold. The first is that we must have the worst ADSL experience, or one of the worst ADSL experiences in the country. We're 3 to 4 kilometers from the telecom exchange in Rosebank, and you literally can't get good ADSL. It's just, the broadband in Parkers is appalling. And to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't have been involved with this project at all if Telkom had rolled out VDSL in our area. I kind of don't really care too much. I mean, I plan to get a gigabit per second from Boomitel now that they're building it, and it's great. But I mean, at the moment, I spend 1,500 Rand a month with Neotel, which is a fantastic service, but it's 6 megabits per second, and it's unbelievably expensive and really bad quality. And the big drive in our community is actually safety. So as Juanita was saying, we're not a gated community. A couple of the vendors that came and presented to us wanted to sign a heads of agreement with the body corporates. I mean, I don't know, it's quite funny. They drive all the way through Parkhurst. It's an open suburb. They fit perfectly well. They arrive, they meet with us, and they say, we'd like to sign a heads of agreement now with your body corporates, and how are we going to issue the levy to raise the money? And I don't know, it was a strange experience in some ways. But the big issue is security, and what we really want to do is roll out CCTV in our area, and in fact, the only way to do that properly is to do it using fiber for your backhaul, simply because of the quality of the video feed that you need. You can't do it. There are wireless CCTV options out there, but they're pretty poor quality. And the whole point, of course, is that when something goes wrong, you need to be able to see faces and be able to record what happened. So South Africa is extremely slow internet speeds. So South Africa is the solid blue line down here. So my interest in all of this partly, of course, is that I work in this area. I work in economic regulation, and so it's something that I'm interested in. But basically, South Africa has some of the slowest broadband speeds in the world, and these lines up here are not America and Europe and so on. This is Russia, for goodness sake. This is China, Brazil. We're not talking about like super advanced, ultra rich countries here at all. We are just so far behind, and it's something that I really want to emphasize, particularly to the vendors in the room as well. And it's something that Vumatel really gets, and it's one of the reasons that we picked them, is that the whole point of fiber to the home is really high speed. There's no point in going to the expense of rolling out this really expensive network, having people sign up, go through all the pain and the drama and the trauma, for the sake of 5 to 15 megabits per second, which is what a lot of the operators bid in at. It's a waste of time. If I get 6 megabits per second when it's online today. We don't need to go through all this drama for 5 to 15 megabits per second. It's silly. What we want to do is have speeds like they see in Russia, and even higher than that. And then, of course, okay, so the big thing is when the big thing to explain to your residents all the time is what fiber does. And there's really a whole lot of things, but really the most important thing is that it makes the houses more valuable. Whatever people understand about high definition Skype or IPTV or whatever, the thing that people understand immediately is that it makes their homes more valuable. And this is very important to explain to them, particularly when you turn your suburb into a construction site, like we're about to in Parkhurst, okay? We're about to trench down both sides of the road across the entire suburb, and it's going to be messy, and there are going to be complaints. But the way to deal with it is to deal with it up front and to explain why we're doing this, and there really are very good reasons. There are a whole lot of them: entertainment, high definition video conferencing, remote working. In our suburb, about 30 to 40% of people either run a business from home, like I do, or at least work from home a few times a week, or indeed are running a shop. There are lots of shops in there as well. So it's a big draw card for people is having really good broadband, and of course security is important. So just to explain the kind of universe of vendors that came along, sorry, there were actually a couple more than this. I'm probably being unfair to some of the people in the room here, and I apologize for that in advance. But just to kind of give everybody like a rough picture of how it works, there's your kind of end-to-end service providers that will come and lay the fiber and provide the internet and provide provide all the services that go with all of that. And there are a few of them. Obviously, there's Vodacom and MTN. They both came to us. They both put in bids. They came with quite big, serious teams that visited us. It's quite impressive. It's Digital Villages, POSIX Systems. There's a few of those guys. Then there are the kind of, so those are your kind of end-to-end providers. So just to roughly explain to people, there's the internet, there's kind of an aggregation point within the suburb, in Parkhurst, and then there's, of course, fiber going to every single home. MTN, Vodacom, they supply the whole lot. Then there's a couple of different providers that provide different services along the way. So in our area, for example, in neighboring Craigle Park, the security company CSS is rolling out fiber to make the CCTV work, and also to drop cables into people's homes. And then there's, of course, Vumatel, who provide the switch and the fiber cable, and they also provide backhaul to about here. Okay, and then from that point on, you can get internet access from a whole range of different providers. Access, Africa, Web Africa, MWeb, lots of them, right? And then there are kind of intermediate players who will roll out a switch maybe, and will roll out the customer premises equipment, so the electronics, but they won't fund the fiber. You'll have to find another way to do that. Cool Ideas is one of them. They're also actually they're an ISP now that provides services in our area. They've already agreed to provide internet on the Vumatel network. Are there any questions so far on that?
Brian, can I ask something?
Yes.
Coming back to the security firm.
Yes.
Is it simply for security purposes that they're deploying fiber anyway?
No, they want to deploy fiber to the home as well. They're doing that in Craigle Park. There are a couple of concerns with their model, and I wish them well by all means. You know, I hope they succeed, and I hope they do, and I hope they get there. Their plan though is to use city power poles, which is what initially we wanted to do. The problem with city power poles though is that they run on one side of the street in most suburbs like ours, certainly. Anyway, and so the problem is that's okay as long as you either roll out a second row of poles down the other side of the street, or you somehow try and get to the second house behind the house that the power pole faces. So there's a couple of challenges with their deployment model, but I mean, I'm sure they'll work through those and figure them out. And I can tell you, we met with City Power, and they are unbelievably supportive about all of this. Their kits, of course, get stolen all the time, so they're very excited to have CCTV on their street poles so that their stuff stops getting stolen. But they're very supportive. I know another the kind of comments that I hear a lot is that, oh, but you can just use Telkom's poles in your backyard. And you know, the reality with that is, I mean, I worked at Neotel. I was part of the team that wrote the local loop unbundling complaint against Telkom. We won that complaint at Neotel 2 years ago. There's still no local loop unbundling for the entire copper local loop, for which there is actually a valid legal basis for getting access to. In terms of ducts and poles, unfortunately, the way the legislation is drafted, it's not clear that Telkom must lease that to other licensees. And that makes, of course, deployment much more expensive.
The CSS network, is it also open access, and does it also get people into the actual Terraco center, or is it via some sort of providers going to break into the 10 or public?
You'd have to talk to CSS about the details of their solution, but what they do often, I know Craigle Park is definitely doing this. They do have an open access type architecture, in the sense that they have at least 3 ISPs that you can pick from. It's not fully open access in the same way that Vumatel is, in the sense that Vumatel leases a dual fiber all the way to Terraco and Isando, where all the ISPs are, so you can literally pick whatever you want. So there is a bit of a difference there, and I'm not sure either what Vumatel or what CSS are charging ISPs on the back end. I don't know what the details are. But when we discussed this with the Craigle Residents Association, I know that was not a trivial amount of money that they were charging for access. So the point there, the other big thing there is also, when you expand this to residents associations and so on, is, you know, everyone sees huge amounts of money, you know, all of a sudden with this kind of thing. And so the Residents Association wants to, you know, force everybody to tack on the Residents Association contribution to this, and the CCTV contribution. And we're going to have, you know, so we're going to be billing our residents and so on and so forth. And my advice to you, as far as possible, is to just keep it simple. By far, the biggest problem with fiber to the home is uptake. It's all about uptake. If fiber to the home was such a logical, simple business case for all the telcos, they would be doing it already. They're not doing it already. Despite, I mean, MTN says, you know, they've lit up Monaghan Farm. I mean, it's a gated community. There are dozens and dozens of gated communities that have fiber to the home. Why? Because they've got a body corporate that can issue a levy, that can fund the construction of the network and drive uptake. Okay. In an open suburb, it doesn't work like that. And so it's all about getting the uptake. So anyway, so I would just I would just kind of, you know, get the stars out of the eyes of the residents association people who see this wonderful way to raise money. Just quite important. I mean, we're still having this debate in Parkhurst today, right? This is not a straightforward issue. Anything else? Okay, so I mean, just, you know, I mean, the way, again, so the problem all of the time with this project is uptake. So the first thing we did was we ran a survey of residents, and we actually had this incredible residents association that's very, very good just in terms of communication. Now, unbelievable. So there's this good I Love Parkhurst Facebook page, which is very successful, and there are thousands of people on it, and the community engages there quite a bit. And anyway, so we drove. We got a whole lot of survey responses. At the time that I put this presentation together for our AGM, there were only 174 responses. We hit 315 responses. We're on about, I would say, 450 actual sign-ups in our suburb as of about today. They're 500 written there, but they're a couple of people. So
how many homes in total?
2,100. So Vumatel said they don't need a formal commitment, but they want a moral commitment for about 30% of the suburbs to take up the service. So at the moment we're on about 25%. Okay, yeah, so it's definitely doable. Okay, and yeah, we were looking at, we asked people in the survey, you know, how are we going to fund this whole thing? It's expensive. Like, do you want to own it or not? And people were kind of indifferent between owning it and having outsourcing the whole thing to a vendor, as you can see. Okay, and yeah, I mean, just in terms of what people seem to be willing to pay. I mean, most people are willing to pay more than R1,000 as a kind of a connection fee, and but in terms of the monthly rental charge, people aren't willing to spend a lot of money, and this is another reason why we picked Vumatel. So at the end of the day, what people are going to do is they're going to compare ADSL, no matter how crap it is, no matter how awful it is, they're going to compare ADSL to whatever you're doing, and they're gonna say, well, is it worth my while? And what Vumatel did is they had a free line rental. Now you still need to buy data on top of that, so it's not free. And of course they charge the ISP slightly. It's not making nothing on the free line rental. But they did have a free line rental, and we've already got one ISP that is offering, or they've got one ISP that's offering an uncapped 4 meg service for R300 per month. So R300 per month, all in, you have 4 meg line to your home, real 4 meg. That's already better that's much cheaper than any ADSL offering out there, and that's already kind of what's available, and it's just really important when you're doing this that people don't value broadband. They don't know what it is. They don't know why they need it, and certainly to hit those very high uptake numbers, which you need like 30, 40, 50% to make it work, you need to have a very cheap offering. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You're not going to get the uptake. You know, it's not going to. Okay. Yeah, and then we've got a couple of offers. There's just a few examples in here. This is from way back when. This is actually from before the call for proposals. But I mean, SA Digital Villages, for example, quoted us about 15 million rand to do it. So again, some of the proposals that we got were unfunded. Again, Vumatel's one was fully funded. That's why they won. One of the reasons why they won. As a residents association, an open suburb, we can't issue a levy or do anything like that. So, and so funding was an important issue. And then, okay, that's just some more detail on some of the packages. And yeah, that's the end of it. I mean,
I'm interested to see what the internet is going to cost based on Vumatel's infrastructure.
Okay, well, in that case, let me just kind of, I think I actually have it here in the presentation. Sorry. Okay, looks like the laptop has slowed down, so it falls. But essentially, how the pricing works is that you've got you've got four products from a line rental perspective. You've got a 4 meg product for no line rental, but a 2,500 rand once-off charge, more or less. And then you've got a 50 meg product for 500 rand per month, including VAT. And that is also with a 2,500 rand once-off charge. And then 100 megs for 700 rand per month, including VAT, for 1,500 rand once-off. And then 1,000 megs for 1,300 rand per month, including VAT, and a 1,500 rand once-off charge. That's the pricing. I'm sorry, it is here.
That's your line rental, yeah. And then ISP costs?
ISP charges. So at the moment, as I said, there's one, but I'm sure the Vumatel guys can go into some more detail. But there's one provider that is providing uncapped on the 4 meg line for 300 rand per month. And then the typically quoted ADSL data charges are 2 rand to 5 rand per gigabyte. So if you want a 100 gigabyte package, 200 bucks.
What's going to happen uncapped on it?
Well, no, I mean, it's just not, at the moment, it's just not possible. It's not going to happen.
Yeah,
I mean,
I can tell you that they definitely don't want to do that. They don't know how consumers behave at the moment. They believe that it's going to go more to a CAT type of arrangement with the high speeds. That's counterintuitive.
I think one question also to the Vumatel guys. So the current line item, so when you've got ASL, you've got your 3 line.
Do you guys want to come up? I mean,
you've got your ASL and then also you've got your ISP cost.
Coming up. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, so you've got your telephone line, you've got your ASL line rental, and you've got your ISP cost.
That's right.
And one of the large contributing factors to the ISP cost is the telecom IP.
That's
how was the model in the Vumatel that
so that's why we actually take the fight all the way back to Telecom, so that we actually never touch the telecom network in essence. So we eliminate the IPC cost for the ISP. Maybe they break out onto the telecom network locally, but in essence that's why we did it that way. So it prevents two things. One is IPC cost, the second one is a backhaul cost, which the smaller ISPs struggle to make work to get it, for example, to where the interconnects happen to the wider world. And Terraco, obviously, all the ISPs are there, and all the undersea cables, etc., for the international breakout is in Terraco.
No, because in terms of, I think, the gigabit per sec, well, just gigabyte per rand cost, almost 70 to 80% of that is just, it's the telecom IPC cost that an ISP has to pay back to telecom to say, please let me use your network.
Exactly.
The IP Connect product, or the portion of charging completely outside, or is there something still similar in the Vumatel network?
No, there is, but it's a much more marginal cost. We pass some of that saving on to the ISP, which we hope will drive down the prices, and because it's open access, there's competition. So at the moment, I think initially you'll see very similar prices to what's in the ADSL market, but we can already see the competition happening. So the service providers are sort of looking at each other. Okay, who's going to blink first and drop the prices? But for example, for the real cost-conscious user, which is maybe a 4 meg line plus 20 gig data, so it's just an old Tony that does the email and watches the grandkids over Skype. It's 170 bucks, all in. So that's fantastic. It's pretty much the same as a telephone line rental at the moment. So so I think that the prices will ultimately come down, because we avoid the IPC cost and we eliminate some of the backhaul cost. And that's the whole driver here.
I believe that also from all of the ISPs, the current model and the pricing model that's being used for the ADSL side, it'll need to be relooked because of a large portion of the cost now is lower reduction on moving the IPC cost to provide gigabytes to the subscriber.
Yeah, I mean, it's just for them, it's quite complex at the moment because they've got a national product out there and they say, okay, well, on this very small network at the moment, the price is X versus Y. So they're just grappling with that sort of dynamic in the marketplace and how they market it. But the prices are very interesting coming back. And obviously the forced line rental for the telephone line rental is not there, which already
adds to the same. One of the big questions they always ask is actually, do we think that customers are all going to take the 4 meg free line and spend no money on data? We don't think so. I think they're just going to buy more capacity, more speed for the money that they spend. Maybe they take some of the saving, but ultimately, I don't think everybody's actually going to take money and put it in their pocket. That's the big bet. Okay. Any other question? Yes.
So a technical question, and I don't know whether it's mostly hybrid, but do you run a point-to-point access Ethernet topology? Your architecture, do you want to make it just
it's active Ethernet. So we're trying to make a leap to make it easy to connect. So the provisioning is the customer will get his installation into the house, which is also interesting. We do an installer model, so there's a little box on the outside of the wall. So imagine multi-choice, you ring up, say, I need my dish. In this case, I need my little device in the room. So installation fee, that's the 1.5 that you see there at the second row from the bottom. And as soon as it's in, go online and you activate it. And because it's active Ethernet, there's no manual intervention. So 20 seconds later, the server should, in theory, be provisioned.
Anybody else?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
A lot of people always ask me, and I've had a lot of requests where people are saying, "Oh, can you send us financial models?" And we're looking at monetizing our network and things. It's important that I don't think there are true models out there right now. I think the models are going to come out now, and I hear what Neil's saying, and I also think, I find it very amusing because I think everybody's going to now, look and try and guess what the next one's doing because it needs to come in just slightly cheaper. But it's really exciting times, and I think this is going to start driving the competition and make FTTH really, really viable here. And Robert.
Yes. Right. On the subject of cost and price, so in fact I've talked with Neil about this, so we saw the number there, which was one of the Access or somebody else's number, which came out at 6,500 rand per home passed, if I recall the number correctly. And so Vumatel has a trenched solution. I don't necessarily, and I'm certainly not going to cast aspersions on that. I think it's a good solution. I just wanted to point out sort of what is achieved in other parts of the world in terms of deployment. Now, in fact, you were emphasizing the definition of fiber to the home. I'm going to talk mostly about cable networks. So cable networks may bring fiber to within a few hundred meters of your home, and then they drop coaxial cable into your house. And what we see achieved in the rest of the world is, well, I've seen the best price I've ever seen. It's about $100, so about 1,000 rand a month cost for the infrastructure for home pass. And typically, cable operators, you'd be struggling if you went above about $200, about 2,500 rand per home pass. So fair enough, that's aerial. That's CapEx, yes. It's aerial, so it is cheaper, but it does bring other challenges. And the countries I'm talking about are, well, Kenya is one example. Several South American countries, Guatemala, Paraguay, and a few other places, and most of Eastern Europe, Romania, and Bulgaria, and that sort of place. So just something to bear in mind. I think there's something to aim for, which is I think there is still an opportunity to go lower. And an interesting point about the example in Kenya. So there's a cable network being rolled out in Kenya, and well, we think. In fact, it's being rolled out in Nairobi, so Nairobi is different from the rest of Kenya, but well, how different is Johannesburg from the rest of South Africa or Cape Town? They're achieving take-up rates. Well, as with most cable operators, they're heading for a take-up rate of about 30%. But in some places, they're getting 70% of homes in a suburb taking up the service. So, as Ryan said, take-up is everything. It's the critical parameter that determines whether this works. And it's really difficult to predict them sometimes. You can do really well, or you can do quite poorly. But anyway, so just putting a few numbers on that.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate it. I don't know if you know, if you talk about, you know, uptake and take up and whatever. I don't know if you guys followed the whole rural fiber thing that happened. I mean, that was just phenomenal. So they put out this competition. They said, if you want fiber, you know, do something. And you know, Kansas City won that, but they organized town hall meetings. They marched. They had T-shirts printed. They went all out. And it's going to take some effort, but you know, that's where we have to get with the education of our communities to say, you know what, we have to get to that point where people are so excited about it that they are saying, I'm so sick and tired of the same content being forced down my throat. I want to be able to watch what I want to watch, when I want to watch it, and you know, have all these additional over-the-top services available, which we don't have now. You know, I watch TV one day of the month. The rest of the time it repeats. No, I don't have to watch it again because I've seen everything that there is going to be shown for, you know, for the whole month. I'd love to have the ability to stream and get online and have my own entertainment experience. And I know that, you know, I bought my husband an Apple TV for Father's Day, and he plugged it in, and we were all very excited, like staring at the TV screen. And he told us that your movie will be ready to be viewed in 6 hours. And we went to bed instead. And that was not really what. So the Apple TV is very nicely packed back into its box. And you know, one day when all of this is taken off, we'll dust it off and plug it back in and try again. And we were going to talk. I've invited Greg Locke from Internet Solutions to talk a little bit about the role players in the industry. Unfortunately, Greg is really sick. He sounded very bad yesterday afternoon, and this morning he just said, I'm not going to make it. So, and I know because I've been battling with this flu for the last month, I can't shake it out. So, but really what Greg was going to talk about, and I think it comes back to Ryan's slide. And once again, I'm not advocating any model or anything, but what I want to put out there, and it's a discussion Alfred and I had yesterday, is that I'm not saying that CCTV companies don't have the right, but you have to have an ECNS license. You have to be a licensed operator. You have to understand. I know I had a meeting with Telkom 2 days ago, and we were talking about the standard of the infrastructure that's been deployed. Now, it's critical when you deploy an open access model and you invite service providers that infrastructure and the standard of the deployment should be extremely high, because they have to guarantee the service level agreement to the end user. They are the ones that are taking the phone calls from people saying, oh, yeah, whose name can I use? You know, ABC ISP really sucks because they're down all the time and the quality and there's latency and there's all these things, when it's actually the infrastructure provider. So it's critical that communities understand these things, look at the infrastructure, make sure that, you know, there are standards that are being adhered to. We can help with those standards. If you want to know what is it, what should it look like from, you know, the outside plant, the civils infrastructure. I know that most companies, most ECNS licensees have got solid standards in place for the deployment. It's normally books this thick. You know, as the FTTH Council, we also engage with SUNS, with the South African National Standards, looking at, you know, all these standards, SABS standards that meet, you know, the SUNS 1200, and, you know, the guys in the room that are more technical will understand these standards. And there are things, you cannot just get any guy, and there are benefits to trench and terrestrial infrastructure, there's benefits to aerial cable, but make sure you understand all these different things. The one is going to drive the cost of deployment down dramatically. But a guy comes from the pub on Friday night, and he takes out a pole, and you know what, guess what, you don't have a service for it. Or you have to have very stringent back-to-back SLAs in place, you've got to make sure that it's back up again. Terrestrial infrastructure, great. Historically, we saw that as a big driver of FTTP because of the stringent service levels attached to it. And I know companies like Telkom, Dark Fiber Africa, Rashadia, you know, they really look at the specifications around the deployment of FTTP, because you know what, when you're delivering a service to a big bank, what was that number, downtime? 250 million a minute? 250 million a minute, 1 minute, 60 seconds. that the bands are not up. So the back-to-back SLAs, the penalties involved in there, you really want to dig trenches and hide that stuff so far that, it doesn't matter what happens, nobody's going to get to it, because if that client's down, they pass those losses and penalties back onto their suppliers. So make sure that you do your homework with your suppliers, make sure that they are licensed, operators, that they understand the standards for deployment, that whatever you bring your community is high quality, sustainable fiber optic. Fiber has got a lifespan, we argue about it all the time, 30 years. It should last 30 years, whatever you put in the ground. That fiber should take you into the next generation comfortably, if it's deployed right. And
Good morning all. So basically the information on the presentation is all in the detail of the presentation, so I'm going to go through it and then we can answer questions afterwards. So just some background of community-based fiber to the home networks in South Africa. Some of the first fiber to the home networks were actually deployed in South Africa back in 2004, which is 4 years ahead of the sort of global liberalization of fiber to the Communications Act in South Africa. Deploying of those networks really necessitated by Telkom's policy of not committing to deploying networks and developments that were considered to be non-viable. Those are typically networks that the return on investment model didn't work, and which forced developers to then start looking at deploying their own fiber to the home network, and Telkom typically playing a wholesale provider to the gate. But today, 10 years later, we've reached the pivotal point where the rapid and mass rollout of fiber to the home solutions to existing estate and brownfield communities in South Africa has started. Century Cities, State City, and now Parkers are just some of these examples. As an industry, we've been preparing for this, and slowly but surely been building up to this point where FTTH network rollouts is about to explode forward with great momentum. Operators like Telkom, Vodacom, MTN have all officially launched FTTH strategies, and licensed alternative operators are continuing to invest time, effort, and capital in further rolling out FTTH to communities. Just in sort of summary, some of the drivers, and this is not necessarily all of them, but I've summarized some of them. So looking at centralized television distribution, where FTTH networks makes it possible to provide satellite and terrestrial television distribution to thousands of homes from a single or redundantly installed satellite and antenna plant. This is very relevant, especially from an aesthetic perspective in a lot of residential estates where developers don't necessarily want to see a lot of dishes and terrestrial antennas. IPTV distribution of broadcast content through the use of DVB-IP solutions. Cloud computing and cloud-based applications, placing more demand on the capacity of networks to effectively communicate down from and up to the cloud. Machine-to-machine interfacing is the great integration of more and more devices such as cars, household appliances, and smart homes into that cloud. Integrated electronic security solutions for perimeter CCTV, gatehouse surveillance, and access control transport over a single network infrastructure. And then intercom and on-net services, especially again in gated communities and communities where people can have free on-net calls to each other and to the security providers. Then obviously your internet connectivity and your voice solution, which is gives you greater access speed options up to 1 gig and beyond. Then content, which includes over-the-top content, which I'll go into more detail a bit later. Multi-screen services and video on demand. So in summary, the pace at which FTTH networks are rolled out is fueled by the human race's ever-growing need to be connected, and the rapid momentum that the dawn of mobile era has brought to the development of applications and services that require faster networks. Just an overall network diagram, and this effectively from a central location feeding services into a community can be done with in multiple ways, either with point-to-point or with technologies like GPON. But effectively it shows integration of services on the one side over a central fiber network that integrates surveillance cameras, takes triple play solutions to the house, which includes voice, video, and data services. So cloud computing. Cloud computing is rapidly changing the way that we access information and interact with each other. It is mainly a business and mobile tool today, but it's increasingly becoming a reality in more and more households for fixed mobile integration. Cloud computing needs high-speed data networks. FTTH enables cloud computing. Machine-to-machine interfacing, generally referred to as the Internet of Things. Combining cloud computing is busy connecting man to more and more devices. It enables more and more devices to connect to us and to each other. Such devices, as I touched on before, includes cars, appliances, smart meters, billboards, smart homes, to name but a few. A bit of a barrier to Africa right now for this to really take off is the coming of IPv6. So it just gives more domain addresses for devices to be able to have unique identifiers. But we'll be getting there. So electronic security, I think the general message is that don't duplicate networks. If you're a community and you're looking at doing a security network, look at combining communication with security deployment. And if you do that, like Janita touched on as well, make sure that that network is rolled out by a licensed ICT operator. IPTV, community-based portals, multi-screen and video on demand. So with more linear and IP-based content becoming available, it's increasingly placing pressure on how we distribute this content. Community portals are changing the way that residents interact with each other, security providers and devices, as well as with the greater community around them. That portal can typically be a portal that is generated on your television sets, on your laptop, or on your mobile device. If that's not familiar with multi-screen, multi-screen effectively allows you to interact with content between your mobile device, the set-top box, and your your handheld device, which is your tablet or your smartphone. Yeah, so over-the-top content, and you need to refer to this, but over-the-top content is rapidly increasing. The availability of high-speed access networks such as FTTH is making it possible for the delivery of OTT services. DSTV box office that we all know, so giving us a first taste of sustainable OTT content coming via satellite. But actually not too long from now, applications like Netflix, Hulu, and the likes will be available for us to transport over these high-speed networks into our houses. That is it. Any questions?
Have we got a sense of which driver in particular is going to be the most attractive to the end consumer? So out of the list that you have.
I would say it will be end-to-end interfacing. Effectively, it really comes into the house, goes to your devices, your fridge, the microwave, the devices in your house, your smart home network, and it interfaces effectively back into the cloud, reaches you via your mobile device anywhere in the world effectively. So I think this is going to be very much a core driver to increase the requirements on a fast access network solution. I think that probably in combination with something like over-the-top content. I'd say those are probably the two main drivers. Questions? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Alfie. We're going to take a break now. Please grab some coffee, stretch the legs, and when we come back, we're going to have Rashad. Rashad's going to talk to us about monetization or financing of the networks. And then we've got Janine Rebello from Vodacom, who's just going to talk a little bit about architectures and potential architectures for FTTH networks. Thanks, everybody. Grab some coffee. See you in about 15 minutes.
Okay, they're just walking out the door. Okay.
Responsible for
Oh, there'll be a discussion.